Welcome back to Spray or Splash Fragrance Reviews. I am Rob. Thank you so much for checking out the channel. Today we're going to hit some fragrances that have tobacco as the primary note. Stay tuned. All right, so tobacco as a note has always been one of my favorite, at least in my top 7 or 8 notes of men's fragrance that I really enjoy. But I do believe that tobacco has this like negative connotation because people will often relate tobacco to like cigarettes. And I know people don't like the way cigarettes smells for the most part. And I think because of that, people will often, tobacco is just okay. It's not my thing. I get it, but I've smelled tobacco done well so many different ways, from an ashy tobacco to like a sweet cherry pipe tobacco. Our first fragrance is actually from the house of Burberry, and it's a fan favorite in Fragcom, Burberry London. This is a 2006 release, and it's just good, top to bottom. It's not mind blowing. It's just a solid dumb reach type tobacco fragrance, one I think most folks need to have in their collection if they want to have just like a solid tobacco fragrance. You can copy it from like 45 to 65 bucks, and I've got the notes on the back of the bottle. Top notes on this one are bergamot, lavender, black pepper, mid notes, mimosa, port wine, leather, base notes, tobacco leaves, and gaiac wood. I definitely get the lavender more in the mid than in the opening. I also definitely get the mimosa, and that port wine, it definitely comes through. Slightly boozy, but more not like boozy rum, but kind of just like a wine booze. You get that in the mid of the fragrance. Tobacco comes through. It's this warm, kind of like pipe tobacco, but not really like cherry tobacco vibe, and it's solid. 6 hours performance, moderate projection, just a solid, again, dumb reach type fragrance, and one I think everyone should have in their collection if they're looking for just a simple tobacco fragrance, okay? And the note for the nose, for the fragrance is Antonio Mason-Doa. All right, so there you go. Again, from the house of Burberry, Burberry London. Next fragrance is a fragrance from the house of Tumi. This is a 2021 release. This is called Continuum. I bought this fragrance directly from the Tumi website. I think it was like 90 bucks. I paid retail. I think I bought this based upon a review from fellow YouTuber Max40. He kind of raved about the fragrance, and I was like, let me go check it out. So I just copped it, blind bought it, hadn't sprayed it, hadn't smelled it, nothing. What I can tell you is I almost did not present the fragrance to you guys. I was kind of disappointed in the fragrance just from smelling it on strips and just spraying my wrist and my hand, being in my place. Like, I didn't get a chance to wear it out until last week. Last week I went to go see King Richard, and I put about 5 or 6 sprays on. I went out with my wife. She said, "You smell good." I, walked to my car. I can smell the fragrance. Drove to the movie theater. I can smell the fragrance. I'm in the movie theater. I can smell it. We come back out. I come home. I can smell it the whole time. The whole time I'm outside, I can just smell the fragrance swirling around me. And I thought it smelled amazing. So it totally made me change my tune when I gave it a full wearing and wore it outdoors. These are the notes, and I'll kind of get into more detail. All right, in the opening for this fragrance, you've got amber, olibanum, green mandarin. In the mid, you've got orris root, tobacco leaf, cistus, incanus, and then in the base, you've got musk, suede, and oud. What the fragrance kind of feels like is this boozy, sweet, slightly like green mandarin, opening. That's what it feels like in the opening. That's what you're getting mostly. And then you kind of get this tobacco, and the tobacco kind of hangs around for the life of the fragrance. Now, what it does on paper is that booze and that orange really pops. It's got this, it's a sparkly, boozy type feel that just smells amazing. But on paper, it kind of like fades out and turns into this almost like non-distinct, like just glob of like nothing. It's just like this smell. It's very indistinct. However, on skin, it kind of keeps that like pop. You smell it in the air, and it's one of those fragrances that smells better in the air than it actually does on skin. That suede note kind of comes to life. That tobacco leaf is there. It's kind of like that sweet tobacco, not necessarily cherry, but more of a sweeter tobacco, like a pipe tobacco. And it's just nice. It's nice. It's a really nice fragrance, and I'm glad that I got the chance to wear it out and I didn't write it off. It's one you definitely need to check out, but I would say try to get a sample, because I don't know if I think it's worth $90. I mean, I don't know if it's on gray market yet. It may be. I'm thinking this, to me, is more, if you can cop it 45 to 55 in that dollar range, I think that's a fair price for it. I bought it because I wanted to get it, really quickly. Paid probably a little much for it, but it's still a solid fragrance, and one I wanted to suggest to you guys. All right, so again, from the house of Tumi Continuum, and it's got a really nice opening mechanism, which I think is probably in line with their luggage bags. You kind of twist this, and the top comes off, and you put it back on, and you twist this, and it locks back in place. Really nice presentation from the house of Tumi Continuum. Fan favorite 2011 release from the house of Thierry Mugler. This is Pure Havane. I'm not going to really get into this one too tough. You guys know about this one already. For those that don't know, this is a fan favorite in FragCom. Pure Havane is one of the fragrances that's very coveted from the Pure or Amen line from Thierry Mugler. You got the original, you've got this, you've got Pure Malt, Pure Tonka, and other fragrances that people really pine for. And this is one of those ones now that is harder to find. If I'm not mistaken, it's probably going for 150 or more. At this point back in the day, it went for between 75 to 85 bucks. The nose on this particular fragrance is Jacques Huckelair. I think that's how you pronounce the last name. And the notes are as follows: white honey, tobacco, vanilla, cacao, patchouli, amber, French labdanum, styrax. Great fragrance. Don't really need to expound too much on it. There's so much on this fragrance online. You can check it out and do your own research. But one to have if you really like tobacco, Pure Havane, Thierry Mugler. 2018 release from the house of Aramis. This is Tobacco Reserve. This is one that kind of came and went. Flew under the radar, didn't get a lot of fanfare. I really liked it. I talked about it in a few fragrances. I saw a few people kind of mention it. This is, I think, based upon the brand kind of falling out of favor and not really being a brand that folks are really checking for anymore. So people just weren't paying attention. But, I read a couple reviews on my own and was like, let me check that one out. It seems like it's pretty nice. I got it. I was totally satisfied and impressed with it. And I think if you're looking for a tobacco fragrance and you are 30 and up, you definitely want to get this one a chance. All right, so let's kind of get into the notes and we'll get into it a little bit more. All right, so in the opening, you've got clary sage, black currant. In the mid, you've got tobacco leaf, nutmeg, and orris root. And then in the base, you've got tonka bean and oak moss. You definitely get the sage in that opening and the black currant. It's got this freshness to it. And the tobacco leaf is nice and smooth, and that tonka bean and orris give it this nice, this sweetness that makes it very appealing. And then it's got the oak moss, which kind of ties it, I guess gives it it roots the fragrance. And I don't want to say it makes it old school, but it makes it masculine. Definitely want to check out if you can get your hands on it. This fragrance is no longer in production. Price-wise, I don't know exactly what they're going for. I'm going to imagine that you can probably cop this fragrance between the price of 65 to 95 bucks currently. It's one that's worth checking out, and I'm suggesting you take the time if you are looking for something like this to check for it. I think it's worth your time. All right? Tobacco Reserve from Aramis. 2015 from the House of Dolce Gabanna. This is the one, EDP. This is another Fragcom darling, and a lot of people really like the one. I can honestly say I was never really a huge fan of the one series. The original release, I always felt like it smelled like something I had already smelled before from back in the 90s. So it never really just clicked with me. This is a good fragrance. I'm not trying to put it down because I know this was a favorite for a lot of people. A lot of people comment they wore this one back in the day, like when they were in college and their 20s, and it just really worked for them, and it was just like this go-to fragrance. So I'm not going to say anything negative about it. I mean, I've got every one in the line except for Royal Nights. I mean, I've got Luminous Nights, I've got Mysterious Nights, I've got Gray, I've got the Gentleman, I've got all of them. This one isn't my favorite. I actually like the EDP Intense more than this one, but that's just me. But this is a nice tobacco fragrance, and I definitely wanted to suggest it. I'm pretty sure anybody checking the video is aware that this is in almost everyone's list when they're talking about like fragrances that they highly recommend. But this is a solid designer tobacco fragrance, and I wanted to include it. All right, so the notes are as follows for this fragrance: grapefruit, coriander, basil, ginger, cardamom, orange blossom, amber, tobacco, cedar. I really feel like the cardamom stands out in the fragrance in addition to the tobacco, of course, but it's also got a slight bit of freshness, which I think comes from that ginger. And it's just like it's a crowd-pleasing fragrance and one that's not hard to like. And I see why so many people enjoy the fragrance. It's one you can easily cop everywhere. Discounters, you can get a regular price if you want to pay regular price and go to a regular, department store, but save some dough. You can cop this one all day long. It's out there to be had. You definitely want to get the EDP versus the original EDT. This has got a little bit more depth and a little bit more, better performance and lasting power. So there you go. From the House of Dolce & Gabbana, the one EDP. From the House of Robert Graham, a 2016 release. This is Fortitude. This is another fragrance that I don't want to say came and went, but was recently discontinued. And Robert Graham had three fragrances. They had Valor, Fortitude, and a third that I can't recall the name of it, but I know it was more of a fresh, kind of like gin and tonic type vibe. Fortitude is really simple, three notes. I believe it's tobacco leaf, tonka, and patchouli. It's also got this nice fresh accord, so I think lavender might be in the fragrance, but it's not listed. It's definitely one worth checking out if you can get your hands on it. Currently on eBay, it's going between $100 and $150 because it's been discontinued. However, I will tell you, I actually bought backup bottles of Fortitude and Valor. I want to say last year for about, I don't want to say, was it last year? It may have been like February of this year for about $65 a piece. So every now and then they get batches, not batches, but they'll get runs of, stock on that website, of the Robert Graham website, and you might be able to catch it. I do know right now, currently they've got the 250 mil, which has got the really detailed top of like the ram's head on this one. I think the other one is a bulldog. I think those are going for like 100 something. Worth checking out. This is a really quality release, and Valor was a quality release. But if you are looking for a nice tonka that's a little different, you're looking for a nice tobacco that's a little different and sweetened with the tonka and has a nice patchouli base, check this one out. Fortitude by Robert Graham. 2013 release from the House of Ormonde, Jayne. This is Montebaco Intensivo. Really solid tobacco release. One that I would say leans more cigarette tobacco versus pipe tobacco. So if the smell of a cigarette turns you off, this might not be the fragrance for you. Even though it's done very, very classy, it takes time to get to the point where I think all of the other supporting notes really kick in. And it's pleasing all the way through, but this isn't the type of fragrance I would wear to work. It's not necessarily the type of fragrance I would wear to a date Maybe if the date is going to take place later in the evening, I would wear it out, but not something that I'm going to spray on and go to meet somebody right away, if that even makes sense. But really well done. Nonetheless, I'm starting to get the DNA of the Ormonde Jayne fragrances. I can't put it into words just yet what it is. It's almost like if people get like the Dior DNA, the Thierry Mugler DNA. I'm starting to catch a certain common theme in these fragrances because I've got about 5 or 6 now from the house of Ormonde Jayne. But this is one that I think is really well done, and if you like that side of tobacco, I think you'll enjoy it. The notes are as follows. You've got mountain air, juniper, orange oil, bergamot, and clary sage. You've got in the mid tea, violet, hedonone, rose, magnolia. Then in the base, you've got tobacco, suede, iso e super, ambergris, sandalwood, moss, tonka bean. And the nose behind it is Giza Schoen, and I believe that's the same person that put together Molecule 01. The tobacco note is consistent throughout the life of the fragrance, and as I said before, it's more of a cigarette tobacco than like the pipe tobacco. The juniper and the sage in the opening kind of give a little bit of freshness to the fragrance, and think of the fragrance as almost like somebody wearing a biker jacket in the beginning of the evening, but before the night is over, they throw on a sports coat and then they got a nice pair of dress shoes. It gets better. It just gets more classy as the fragrance goes on. So it's kind of, I don't want to say it's rough in the beginning, but it's kind of like smoky. But then it kind of smooths out because that sandalwood comes in and some of the other supporting notes come in and they smooth it out. They make it more classy. And it's just a well done fragrance. And it's got that Ormonde Jayne class to it, believe it or not. It's got that Ormonde Jayne class that when I mentioned that whole DNA thing, it's got that. So it's one worth checking out. I'm happy to have it in my collection because it is giving me a side of tobacco that I didn't really have already. And that's more of that sort of cigarette tobacco versus the pipe tobacco. So again, from the house of Ormonde Jayne, this is Montebaco Intensivo. From the house of 1821 ManMade, 2016 release, this is Sweet Tobacco. For those that know, this is also a fragrance that was a Fragcom darling for a moment. It kind of got on the hype train, and people were kind of hyping this one up, and then it kind of like fell off, but this was a quality release. I know when it came out, I was searching, and believe it or not, I bought this at JCPenney. I bought this JCPenney online, and I want to say it was like $85 to get this. This is a nicely done tobacco fragrance, and the honey is so big in this fragrance. Honey, like I said earlier, is one of those notes that it is so big of a note that it can take over a fragrance. And this is one where it like went to the edge and it almost took over the tobacco, but they stopped it at the absolute max. It's this really nice honey tobacco fragrance, and as the fragrance goes on, that honey kind of pulls back and the tobacco is out in front, but it's definitely a heavy player. So if you don't like honey as a note, you're not gonna like this fragrance. But this is really well done. It's powerful. You don't need to overspray it. This is like a 4-spray fragrance, lasts 8 hours plus, projects nicely. I don't know who the nose is, but it's definitely one worth trying to see if you can check it out. The notes for the fragrance are as follows: citrus, dried fruit, spicy saffron, wild manuka honey, dark vanilla, tonka bean, tobacco, exotic woods. You can currently catch the fragrance on the 1821 ManMade website for $80 plus free shipping. I have no association or affiliation with that brand, just giving you guys the knowledge. If this sounds like a fragrance you guys might be interested in, it might be time to try to check this one out. 1821 ManMade Sweet Tobacco. 2016 release from the house of Nishane. This is Fan Your Flames. This is one you may not have expected to see as a fragrance. I'm suggesting as a tobacco fragrance. I don't automatically think of tobacco when I think of Fan Your Flames. I tend to think of the rum and coconut note, But that tobacco note is pretty dominant and it lasts throughout the whole life of the fragrance. Whereas I feel like the rum and coconut, they kind of fade off. There's this eucalyptus note that kind of like hangs around the life of the fragrance because it somehow or another, like with the other notes, it kind of is supposed to represent this flame. And I kind of struggled with the fragrance in the beginning because the eucalyptus wasn't used the way I had come to love it, the way it was in Body Coros by YSL. But this is a totally different fragrance, and tobacco is one of the main players. So again, I wanted to present it to you guys. The notes for this particular fragrance are as follows. You've got coconut, rum, eucalyptus, tobacco, tonka bean, Chinese cedar, and oak moss. So I think that Chinese cedar, oak moss, and eucalyptus kind of work together to kind of give it this like flame fire type accord they're trying to go for. And the opening rum and coconut really make the fragrance interesting. And then you've got that tobacco accord that goes throughout the life of the fragrance. It's one worth checking out. This was a niche frag darling, and a lot of people speak highly of this fragrance. So I wanted to definitely suggest it for you guys. From the house of Nishane, this is Fan Your Flames. Coming down to the last two, this first one is a 2014 release from the house of Papillon Artisan Perfumes. This is Tobacco Rose. And believe it or not, tobacco is not listed as a note, all right? But tobacco is the most dominant note, with rose being a very, very close second. This is a kind of dry, ashy type of tobacco, and rose is, I don't want to say neck and neck, it's like 60-40, something like that as far as how much you're getting of each one. But it's got solid performance, and if you're looking for like a tobacco rose combo, and with the tobacco being more on the dry side, this is one to definitely check out. Okay, the notes for this particular fragrance are as follows. You got Bulgarian rose, rose de mai, oak moss, ambergris, beeswax, and Peru balsam. You definitely get that beeswax in the fragrance, and the Peru balsam kind of comes through. The rose feels very green to me, but this is a solid fragrance, and one, again, to definitely check out if you are interested in something that's a combination of tobacco and rose. All right, Tobacco Rose from Papillon Artisan Perfumes. Last but not least, 2005 release from the house of Serge Lutens. This is Chergui. This is another fragrance that is a Fragcom darling. Chergui is one that has been talked about since I've been on Fragcom or in Fragcom, and it's one that I've kind of thought about pulling the trigger on multiple times and finally pulled the trigger, and I thought I was actually getting a vintage bottle, but I got this latest like new black label bottle. I can't say for certain if there's any difference. Like, I would like to smell a vintage to see if there's any difference at all between, you know, this one and that one, but this is a solid tobacco fragrance. It's very powdery for me. It's, I don't want to say it's borderline, like it's right there. Like, any more powdery, I wouldn't like it, but it's one of those fragrances that smells good in the air for me. And I kind of get what they're saying with this hay note. This hay note kind of smooths it out, and it's a little different, and it adds a little bit of, I guess, interest with this fragrance. The notes for this particular fragrance are as follows. You've got tobacco leaf, honey, amber, hay, incense, sandalwood, iris, musk, rose. You definitely get the iris and the rose in the base. You definitely get the sandalwood. Sandalwood smooths it out. You get that honey also. They use the honey just right. It's done in a way where it doesn't overtake the fragrance, and it's a nice accent or compliment to the fragrance. Definitely a fragrance that I need to spend more time with, but I wanted to suggest the fragrance to you guys because I know it's so highly regarded in Fragcom, and it's one I'm getting to know. So there you go, from the house of Serge Lutens. This is Chergui. Guys, I thank you so much for checking out the video, coming back to the channel. If you've never subscribed, I'd ask that you subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up if you feel led to do so. Take care. I will talk to you soon. Later.